Dome, sweet dome. I'm not sure if it was the magic of the Alamo Dome, the black uniforms, or a combination of the two, but UTSA pulled off the upset at home, beating Tulane 48-26. There was a lot of drama leading up to the game, including some disappointing comments from Coach Traylor, hosting Sports Center on campus, and a strong end to the soccer team's regular season. There's a lot to discuss in this episode, so let's get started.
This is episode 122 of the Hail Mary podcast. I'm the Toves, and I'm joined, as always, by my wife, A. Toves. Certainly a shocking result based on what UTSA looked like and sounded like after that North Texas loss. But we shouldn't be surprised, and I always feel like there's going to be surprise that Coach Traylor comes and thumps his chest after, a big win. And instead of celebrating it, we get the usual Coach Traylor comments about fill in the blank, and it's just getting the team to 4-4.
Yeah, and I want to address what Coach Traylor's comments were both pre and post game, but let's do that after we talk about the game, because I think it's really more important right now to celebrate what this team accomplished on the field.
Sounds good.
First of all, before we get into the game, what an amazing turnout we had for Sports Center. They came on campus pre-game to do their Sports Center session, to interview Coach Traylor. And, we were a little concerned at first that they were going on campus versus going to the Alamo Dome and kind of showcasing the Riverwalk. Weren't really sure what kind of crowd we were going to get, but they said it was their largest campus crowd that they've had in Sports Center history. There was a phenomenal turnout, and I think it really did a great job of just not only displaying what San Antonio is like, but, really giving some attention to the campus and what the university is like.
Well, that's the most important part, is just the campus, right? Like, they get a chance to see UTSA students. And now that that UTSA has become much more of a traditional school, I guess is the best way to put it, it's also fun to see that there's actually students that actually live there and that are getting to enjoy a college experience, as opposed to before when it was much more of a commuter school. Mm-hmm. And there wasn't a lot of students there on campus to see this moment.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let's get into kind of talking about the game overall. Going into this stretch, we said there were three things that needed to happen for UTSA to win. They were going to need to execute extremely well. We would need our opponent to make mistakes, and we were going to need to capitalize on those mistakes. I think it's safe to say we saw all three of those occur in this game.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I mean, first of all, John Summerall handed UTSA some easy fodder with the piped-in comment noise. Much like Dana Holgerson and Dana Dimmel did in the past, Summerall was just trying to really get some deflection of attention towards his team and just kind of focus it on himself. But all it really did was just kind of stir up all these UTSA fans, and everybody kind of was much more hyped up about it. And he did what was needed, which was to get a little more excitement around this game, because even for UTSA fans, there really weren't many that showed up.
Yeah.
First of all, and personally, I didn't care about the comments. I mean, you hear it from certain coaches, and you know what they're trying to do, but all you're doing is pumping up this home crowd. So I don't think you're really accomplishing what you think you're accomplishing.
Yeah, I did love that the in-game commentator mentioned, that we won at the end of the game, even without piped-in noise. I did think, though, when we were talking to our friends at the game, there was probably some more opportunity for them to kind of poke fun at it throughout the game, just because this does come up every now and then. And let's be honest, A, it's ridiculous, and B, it's a dome. Of course it's going to be loud. That's the beauty of the dome. There really doesn't have to be that large of a crowd for it to sound like there's a gigantic crowd there.
Well, I don't know why you encourage, the opposing fans to cheer even louder when
Right.
You've got the ball. I mean, it's just silly. It really was just silly. But I mean, coaches are going to do what the coaches are going to do. They're going to make those comments, whatever. I would say the second thing, though, that we did see was that Tulane had 4 turnovers, 3 interceptions, and a fumble. And they looked every bit the sloppy, immature team that John Summerall had quipped about earlier in the week. I think in reality, Tulane looked like UTSA from just one game ago. They did look like a couple steps slower than UTSA this entire time, and I thought during this game, I didn't think Tulane was a world beater, but they always just found a way to win, and it kind of reminded me a lot of the UTSA soccer team, where you're like, I don't know how they're doing it, but they're finding a way to get a result. And Tulane was finding a way to either tie up a game, to take it to overtime so they can win it in overtime, or they were just getting that last-minute drive. And that just felt like there was so much fight in them. But I do think that at some point, some of those things do catch up to you because you don't get a chance to really control the game. And Tulane never really felt like they controlled the game. Right. They came out strong, but then it felt like they just used all that juice in the very beginning.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly, I think, probably got a little bit cocky coming into this game because they had been successful at finding a way to win. And they also knew that they had an opportunity because there weren't that many teams left that were undefeated in conference.
Sure.
And I think they just overlooked UTSA. And like John Summerall said, they were immature, and that's what happens when you have an immature team. They overlook their opponent.
Right. And we've heard that too at times from, Coach Pittman, which is why I wanted to tie it back to the soccer team, because I felt like that it just fit right there. Except I think this UTSA soccer team is a little more talented than Tulane football team, but that's a different story.
Yeah, I mean, overall, this was the best offensive performance we've seen all season from this team. And I think it's safe to say it was the most complete game of the year. There were still too many penalties. I mean, we had 10 penalties for 116 yards. Several of them were unnecessary. 5 pass interference penalties, offsetting unsportsmanlike conduct penalties, roughing the passer, those types of things that we'll certainly have to keep our eye on. But overall, this was the type of game that we've expected to see from UTSA all season, but it hasn't quite materialized the way that it did, on this day.
Sure. Then, being able to put up 48 points. I mean, it was a nice way to really tie up, I think, an offense that really needed this type of performance. But again, you kind of start thinking back and saying, well, why can't they do this on the road? Why can't there be this type of effectiveness on the road as well? And I think that's just the weird of this team, is that they just can't get outside of themselves. So let's talk a little bit about the offense then. They racked up a season best 523 total yards, 391 through the air, 132 on the ground. As I said, part of this challenge is just trying to replicate that on the road. And I will say, it's not trying to get 500 yards of total offense on the road. It's moving the chains and, being effective and staying on the field and giving your defense a chance to rest and not have to worry about defending opposing offenses. That's the complementary football that we've talked about. That's what I think we should really be focusing on when we talk about we want to see this type of performance on the road. And it's not also putting up 48 points. 48 points just happened, right? There's reasons why this all happened. But let's get to the performance really of Owen McCown, because I think that's where this offensive performance really started.
Just an amazing night for Owen McCown. He looked healthy, and he looked like the quarterback that we expected to see all season. He completed almost 94% of his passes for 370 yards, 4 touchdowns, broke the school record by completing 16 consecutive passes, which eclipsed Frank Harris back in the 2019 UIW game. And his completion percentage at just under 94% broke the single game record that he achieved himself back at the Tennessee game.
I think it was more than just Owen looking thought healthy. And I think it really, to me, was that he got the passes and had the passing lanes that he had been wanting to see, which is to say, Tulane, to me, and this, we have only watched the game in person. We didn't actually get to see a replay of this, but it looked like Tulane was stacking the box and didn't want Robert Henry to essentially manhandle them. So in doing so, left a lot of one-on-ones with the receivers. And the receivers have struggled all season to get separation and to really give Owen McCown some passing lanes, or at least some passing targets to hit. And there's certainly been a lot of talk about, just the not being on the same page, things just being disoriented, really. So that I thought was huge in the fact that he had just much more of a clear path to his passing target, that he had easier passes, and that he was mixing it up. I mean, it wasn't just solely throwing screen after screen after screen and then, maybe trying to throw one downfield. It really was the fact that they mixed up, the short, intermediate, and long passes. And I mean, you got to see the tight ends go downfield a little bit. You got to see the wide receivers actually kind of break open, but a lot of it was one-on-one coverage, and they took advantage of it, which was something that I think if you had asked either one of us before the game, we would not have guessed that our receivers would have done that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we got to see a little bit of trickery with David Amador throwing his first career touchdown pass at UTSA, connecting with Devin McEwen on a 21-yard touchdown pass.
Yeah. And our friend Big Brown was like, I could see it develop all of a sudden. He's like, all of a sudden I see, a receiver just kind of separating away from the rest of the defense. And it's like, oh, there's the pass. They're going for a double pass. So it's those situations where, like, obviously they throw in the trick plays, and those are always fun, but it's about having, like, really just this cohesive offensive game plan. And it looked like it was much more cohesive. I mean, first of all, like we already talked about, you have a quarterback that's on a hot streak, and that just helps your skill players get in space and have the opportunity to make plays. And, with David Amador, we know he can pass. We do. That's not a secret, but we hadn't really seen him do much of it. They hadn't really moved him around too much. It felt like it was just a lot of times he was going up against a defensive back and he wasn't getting separation. In this game, he just got, the ball fed to him. He had 10 receptions for 113 yards and 2 touchdowns along with that passing touchdown. It's this type of offensive style that, as you already said quite a few times, this is what we thought the offense might look like, and it would help the defense. And it certainly did help the defense, but I think overall, in terms of this offensive display, I mean, there's no knocks on the offensive line. There's really no other knocks that you can give. I mean, just well done.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anytime you have a game where you can sustain drives and you only have 3 punts, we love our special teams, but we don't want to see our punter very often.
Yeah, that's very true. Well, let's get over to the defense. All right. Let's keep things in perspective here, because I didn't think the defense played as well as I think everybody would think it did. It was helped because of the offense just had consecutive drive after consecutive drive that was scoring. So it began to snowball on the offensive end, and then Tulane became desperate offensively. But even then, I don't want to say that the defense was absolutely, terrible, but I think it's encouraging that they didn't have one of their best games, yet they were able to, get some turnovers, and they were able to keep this team in the game. And that, more than anything, is a positive sign that they're at least can figure some things out going down the next few stretch of games, because certainly it's not going to get easier in the next game, but even after that, it's just going to be game after game, week after week. So this team's going to have to keep up this intensity as we head down the stretch of the season.
Yeah, when you look at the PFF scores for the defense, you'll see that they're pretty average and pretty consistent with what we've seen from them in other games where, certainly if you were to go back and look at the offense, the first thing that will jump off the screen at you is just how high the offensive PFF scores are. But all of that said, we've talked a lot about creating turnovers, getting those opportunities, making those catches when they're presented. And like you said, we had 4 takeaways in this game, 3 interceptions and a fumble recovery. The last time that happened where we had 3 interceptions in a game was back in 2022 when we played Louisiana Tech.
Yeah. So, I mean, going back to that, you're right. I mean, we get those chances to make those catches. And let's be honest, like, this Tulane offense just looked out of sorts. It felt like they were trying too hard to hit a big play. And I mean, I guess you could say that we had seen that a little bit before from Tulane, but for the most part, it felt like they were much more disciplined before in previous games where they didn't get desperate. But I think that desperation allowed, and especially with the Tulane quarterbacks, like, just really being inaccurate. Like I thought that was just baffling to me.
Sure.
There was a lot of inaccuracy with these two quarterbacks, and I thought that allowed our cornerbacks and our secondary to actually make the catches. I don't know that I would say that there was a lot of pressure on the quarterbacks that forced them into bad throws. They just made bad throws, and UTSA really took advantage of it. Now, again, you talked about some of the undisciplined stuff, some of the roughing the passer. That's why I think you can't really say that this was a great defensive performance or a good one. It was fine, but let's build on this. I think that's the main thing to take from here.
A couple of individual performances, though, that I think we should just talk about. Sophomore cornerback Ahmad Chapman made his first career start, and in this game, he recorded his first interception as a Roadrunner. Yeah,
we saw him pop up on the depth chart, and I thought it was kind of weird, but the fact that he came in and made some plays, I mean, that, again, you don't really look for the cornerbacks. You'll see it. Some of them that are actually going to be out there, like KK Meyer is somebody that immediately jumps out to me because, A, we met him at signing day, B, he's probably the biggest cornerback name that we have, I think, at this moment. So that's a guy that I'll look for. But Ahmad Chapman, I mean, making some plays. Again, to me, it was Tulane being inaccurate. But to make the catches, I mean, you have to make those catches. We've seen before where UTSA has made interceptions and there was, a penalty which kept them from taking advantage of that turnover. So this kind of coming together, it's good to see that happen this game.
Yeah, safety Tyan Milton logged 6 tackles, an interception, pass breakup, and forced a fumble.
Yeah, I mean, he's had, I think, sort of a up and down season, and so this is the up right now, and hopefully that he can continue this momentum in the next game.
Jamarius Lewis also recorded his second interception as a Roadrunner. Another guy where I think you could kind of say a little bit of an up and down game. He had a pass interference that was probably a little unnecessary, but I think he leveled out the karma with his interception.
Yeah, I'd say so. Again, just catch those passes when they come your way, and Tulane made plenty of throws to take advantage of those.
And then Jimmy Wyrick, of course, had the fumble recovery.
Yeah, and I thought Jimmy, again, another one that had an up and down game, right? And a lot of this was the fact that this referee crew, which I recognized immediately to you, which is, I know it's weird, but I recognized them. I believe that this referee crew we're undefeated with over the last 2 seasons, and they have some weird calls. They're very pass interference positive, I guess is the best way to put it, because they like to throw those flags on pass interference, and
Clearly.
there was plenty.
I mean, we had 5 of them. So
yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Like, I think they have a particular way that they don't want to see hands on, the receivers, and certainly in this game, they pretty much lent for it.
All right. Well, moving on to special teams, we already mentioned that while we appreciate the progress that Cale has made, we don't necessarily want to see him on the field very much, but on those 3 punts that he had on Thursday evening, he averaged 46.3 yards per punt, and he had a long of 59 yards.
Yeah, Cale is just having a really good season. I mean, we had talked about him a lot last season. We thought it was going to take some time, and then it looks like another season plus some time in the weight room helped Cale. It's funny because, you talked about before about the past UTSA punters, and it just feels like Cale's season is going to go under the radar, yet he's had as good of a season as any of those, classic UTSA punters have.
Yeah, definitely. And then, of course, Michael Petro connected on a 34 and a 43-yard field goal. Again, there was question marks about him at the beginning of the season, but I think he's demonstrated that, he's a really consistent kicker and likely will continue to develop.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, no issues, I think, with Petro. I will say, though, tying everything together, I thought it was a pretty good performance, taking into account the defense's performance overall for this team. Obviously that they had what they felt was a lot of frustration coming off of that North Texas game, and it certainly feels like they corrected some mistakes, and they were able to take advantage of their opponents having the mistakes.
All right, well, let's talk about the elephant in the room.
Okay.
Jeff Traylor made some disappointing comments leading up to the game and post-game that, in my opinion, just detracted from what his team achieved and has led us to have to talk about some of these things, even though really everything should just be focused on what the team did on the field and where the program is going as a whole. It started on Tuesday at the radio show when Jeff Traylor was talking about the commitment UTSA had to the American Conference. He said, but moving forward, if we want our team to look better than it does, we have to invest more into it. But right now, it's my responsibility to coach the team I have. Tulane, Memphis, South Florida, they're different. You know, when I hear those comments, if I were a parent of a potential player or a potential player, I'm not sure that I would want to come to UTSA, because what that is telling me is Coach Traylor can't get the kind of players he wants, so he's just settling for what he can get, which would make me as a recruit feel like, does this coach really want me, or is he just settling for me because he thinks he can't get someone better?
Well, it's good that the players are also off social media and not listening to anything of the noise, as he puts it, because I'm sure this would be a bigger thing in the locker room, but because they're not listening, they're not going to hear it. And I think that's the most important part. As fans, obviously, we're going to have problems with it, but then on the other hand, it's just lack of self-awareness for him, because he could be losing the team here. And this right there, those comments are the types of things that we had focused on before after that North Texas loss, which was this team felt on the cusp of breaking apart if it hadn't already fractured. I don't know. It feels like there's already some fractures, but, you know, whatever. I guess a big win will just smooth things over.
Then post-game, he said, spoiled rotten media, some fair weather fans. Shut them up for a week. But the loyal ones, the true ones that have been there since day one and always staying there, that's who we play for. Them chirping birds, we don't really give a crap about, but shut them up for a week. He went on to say that, again, his kids are off social media, they're tough-minded kids, and they don't listen to you and all the podcasters. Then, of course, he went on again to make his plea for additional money. He said, we need help. We've got to have help. You're not going to regularly beat Tulane, Memphis, Florida. We got to step up. I begged for this when we were winning. Unbelievable. Honestly, we need to go 2-10, about 4 more years, and then we'll step up. But you have to raise money to fire me. You have to raise money to hire another staff. And you could have just raised the money and got the help now and invested and not had to worry about all that's coming down the road. You know, when I hear comments like that, I think Jeff Traylor just needs to remember that unlike in high school football, those chirping birds you said you didn't give a crap about aren't just fans. They're donors who invest in your team and the entire athletics program. I think instead of looking at them as haters or detractors or whatever you want to say, he needs to think of them as investors. And right now they're looking at him and they're questioning their return on investment. If he wants people to give him money like he says he needs to do all of these things that we need for the program, he's going to need those investors. So he needs to rethink how he addresses them. I don't think he's in any position to alienate these fans, donors, and investors. We've had a head coach who did that before. Let's just say it didn't end well. Let's move on and talk about our South Florida preview. UTSA is 1-0 against South Florida and Byram Brown. This is the only conference opponent we're going to face this season with the same coach and the same quarterback as the last time we played him. Of course, that was back in 2023.
It feels even longer than that. It is a long 2 years, but still, it feels like actually it would have been like 3 or 4 years ago. So regardless, USF comes in 3-1 in conference and 6-2 overall. They're also 4-0 at home. So obviously some things that to consider as we go into this preview.
Yeah, their offensive coordinator, they actually have co-offensive coordinators, Cody Burns, who's in his first season, and Joel Gordon, who's in his second season.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much they kind of take on the same type of offensive game plan that Alex Golish has been famous for when he came over from Tennessee to become the head coach of USF. So, this team is going to want to be able to run and pass, but I know that sounds kind of funny, but really it's be able to do both well at the same time. And with Byron Brown, you get something like that, which now let's kind of go over to the stats and we'll give you an idea of what I mean. This team averages about 225.5 yards per game and on the ground and 261.5 yards per game in the air. Pretty balanced in terms of yardage, and that gets you a whole 487 yards per game offensively, which is 7th in the nation. Atos, we have struggled whenever we've played any sort of team that is that high offensively because this defense has had so many issues, trying to stop a quarterback too that is able to be mobile, and that's what we're going to be facing. They score about 40.4 points per game, which is 6th nationally. Again, when we play some of these teams, it's very difficult on our defense. Third down conversions, they convert about 48%, and then fourth down is 60%. So, they do a pretty good job of sustaining drives, and that is one thing that, while sometimes you want to hit on a big play, if this South Florida team can continue to extend drives on UTSA, it's going to be very difficult for this defense to get off the field, and it's going to be very difficult for this UTSA team to be able to compete in Tampa.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that you have to remember when you're playing South Florida is that they play extremely fast. And because they play extremely fast, you can't substitute on the defensive side because they're not substituting on the offensive side. So that's going to be a big struggle for our team because we're so used to rotating on defense, and we're likely not going to have the opportunity to do that.
That is a great point because Jesslep defenses have historically struggled when it comes to teams that go this fast because he's had a lot of problems trying to get plays in. And that came up earlier in the season when they were talking about, playing some of the fast teams because they weren't getting the call, and because of it, they weren't lined up correctly. And that's exactly what an offense like this does. It gets you out of sorts, and it puts you in a position where you either have to take a costly timeout early in the game or you're just not ready. So, yeah, it's mismatches after mismatches.
Yeah, and really, you have to be really strong on defense because there's an opportunity when the offense is playing that fast that they're going to struggle and make mistakes. And we've seen that when we've watched South Florida. At times, they almost go too fast.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to take advantage of that. But if our defense is looking to the sideline for a play, they may miss those opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, let's get into the key players. Of course, Byron Brown is the star of their offense. When we played him back in 2023, we talked about how talented he looked at the time and how we thought if he was able to stay healthy and develop that he could turn into, a really impressive quarterback. And this season he's been healthy and we've seen that. He has a 62.9 completion rate for 1,964 yards, 17 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. He really is the epitome of a dual threat quarterback. Very much like Frank Harris in that he can scramble. He probably scrambles a bit too much, but he is their leading rusher at 120 carries for 596 yards, 8 rushing touchdowns. Again, when you look at Byron Brown and you're a UTSA fan, think Frank Harris because that's what you're going to see on the field.
A bigger, stronger Frank Harris. One of the things we were always concerned with Frank Harris was the amount of hits. And that's the same thing you could say about Byron Brown, though, because he's bigger, he could withstand some of the hits that Frank really couldn't. Byron, his only problem has been the fact that he's been more inconsistent than Frank was. And I think that has been the biggest difference in their college careers is that Frank found a way, whereas Byram is starting to find it as he finishes up his college career.
You'll see Byram has a couple of wide receivers that are kind of his go-to guys. One of those is Chaz Nimrod. He's a senior wide receiver transfer from Tennessee. Right now, he leads the wide receivers in terms of yards. He has 23 receptions for 466 yards, 3 touchdowns. One of the things I thought was kind of interesting about him, though, is that his average reception is 20 yards.
Quite a big play guy.
Definitely. The other guy that you'll hear called out several times is Keshawn Singleton. He's a junior wide receiver. He leads the team in terms of the number of receptions. So he has 29 receptions for 451 yards, 3 touchdowns, but still 15 yards average reception.
Yeah, these receivers are getting the ball down the field, and or turning some of these receptions into large gains. So that's something that this UTSA team is going to have to figure out defensively, is how to defend them, but also how are you going to be able to contain them to not take advantage of, or at least hit their average yards.
After Byron Brown, the true running back that is leading in terms of number of carries is Sam Franklin. He is a senior transfer from Oklahoma. He has 50 carries for 346 yards, 4 touchdowns. He averages 7.1 yards per carry. But unlike what we saw with Tulane, where we kind of talked about their running backs being like the shorter yardage bruiser guys, this guy is able to break off long receptions like Robert Henry. He had a 73-yard long against Memphis in their last game.
Yeah, it's pretty. I mean, they're explosive. I think you had summed it up, which is kind of weird because I'm about to tell you that their offensive line is pretty average. So it tells you where they put their emphasis on this offense, and that was on their skill players, obviously, on their quarterback. And because of it, that makes them much more dangerous. And maybe if they had a little bit better offensive line, they might be quite unstoppable on offense. So let's get over to the defense, Toes.
Our defensive coordinator is Todd Orlando. He's in their second season. You know, the defense isn't necessarily the strength of South Florida, but year over year, we've seen quite a bit of improvement in them, which I think has allowed the South Florida team to really develop into the powerhouse that it's become.
Yeah. And I think this, you see the same thing with UTSA at times, where it was like the offense always kind of carried the team and the defense just did enough. The difference is I think this defense is bigger and stronger than what UTSA has seen before, and especially at a kind of G5, G6 level, it causes a lot of problems. Let me give you some stats here, and I think you may think, well, that doesn't seem too good, but they give about 387.3 yards per game. That's about 115 yards rushing, which puts them 31st in the league, or in the nation. They do give up 272.4 passing yards. That is 127th out of almost 136 teams. So they're at the bottom of the barrel, which puts them about 89th in the nation. Still, they're better than UTSA's defense statistically in that regard. Now, they do give up only 24.4 points per game. That's 70th in the nation. And they only allow, the third down conversions, they only allow about 39.2%. And, on fourth downs, though, you're more likely to make it. And I think the fourth down conversions only really comes into play a lot is when you see teams that are really good at stopping on fourth down. Usually that means that there's longer fourth down conversions. But we've seen with this, I think, South Florida team that they can be a little flimsy at times. But for the most part, I think they're going to do whatever they need to do and cause some turnovers to flip games and help out this offense.
All right, let's talk about a couple of their key players. Mac Harris is the senior linebacker. He's the one who leads in solo tackles at 37. He also leads in total tackles at 69. And he leads the team in sacks at 5.5 sacks. He also has 1 interception to his credit. So I think it's fair to say that Mac is a disruptor.
And a playmaker, right? It's just... it's incredible. But, you see some of these defenses, and that's what you get from, a linebacker of his caliber. You also have a left outside linebacker, Ashton Mosley, and defensive lineman Travion Mitchell. They both bring some pass rush to this South Florida team, and I think that we have to watch out for, especially in an offensive line. They do have a pretty sturdy DL, which we also include here, Devin Lee, who's a big-time run stopper. So these guys are going to be big during the pass rush. They're also going to have some problems with the rush at times, but Devin Lee does a lot of good jobs cleaning it up. So if we can gash them, it could help UTSA offense stay on the field and keep that South Florida offense off of it.
Even though you talked about their pass defense not being that great, their cornerbacks both have a pair of interceptions to their credit. Junior Jarvis Lee and sophomore James Chenal. Also, Jarvis has a forced fumble. So we can't just discount their pass defense because, they certainly can cause turnovers at times as well.
Yeah, and that's fair. I mean, if you're not having success on the ground, then you're going to have to go through the air. And especially the way they've blown out some teams, those teams go to the air exclusively. And so they rack up some yards. So there's some trash time, stats in there. Regardless, though, they're still near the bottom of the nation here. So that gives you a glimmer of hope, I guess is the best way to put it.
Certainly. All right, let's talk a little bit about special teams. They're led by their special teams coordinator, Chad Creamer. He's in his second season. Their kicker is Nico Gramatica, and I think you had some interesting facts about him.
Yeah, his dad is Martin Gramatica. His nickname was Automatica because of just the way he always made field goals. He was of Tampa Buccaneer fame at the turn of the century when we were coming out of college and, becoming adults, I guess. He's only maybe a year or so older than either one of us. So the thing is that he's around our age. Kind of cool to see it. On the other hand, it kind of makes you feel even older because you're like, wow, we're seeing their kid now play.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Nico is 11 for 15 on his field goal attempts. He's missed 1 over 40, 3 over 50, but he does have a long of 52. Unfortunately, he missed the field goal that could have tied the game with Memphis and maybe taken him into overtime. So I'm sure he is probably still reeling from that and not sure, how much trust they'll put in him. We'll see in this game, but, pretty consistent overall.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the biggest thing to take away from Gramatica is the fact that, he's got a leg. So that means, they're not going to be afraid to kick a long field goal if they get in position. So, add the explosive offense to a pretty good kicking game, and that's how you get to be number 6 in the nation scoring. All right, you want to start us off in the Hail Mary predictions?
Sure. Well, we continue to be a Jekyll and Hyde team that plays well at home, but we struggle when we get on the road. I'd love to say that this big win that we had over Tulane is going to propel us to another upset in South Florida, but we saw what happened after we had a big win against Rice, and then we went into North Texas. So I anticipate that we're going to continue to see our road struggles. Unfortunately, give me South Florida over UTSA 41-27.
To your Jekyll and Hyde team comment, I give you factual stats. 21.2 points scored versus 37.9 points allowed on the road since the start of 2024. Jeff Traylor doesn't handle prosperity well, and that filters down to his team. So simply put, I had a bigger score here, but I was nicer. Give me South Florida 48-20 over UTSA in a game that's not even as close as the score seems. Well, let's transition now away from football to football and talk about UTSA soccer. They had a rough stretch. Felt like there was just like 3 tough games that, they lost 2-0, 2-0, and then 2-1. And it just felt like this slide could put them in a position where, there might be further damage to their tournament appearance. And by tournament appearance, I mean just getting a seeding that's much lower. Didn't happen because we went to Temple and we were able to tough out a 3-1 win over the Owls. So let's talk about the good, bad, and ugly. First of all, let's start with the ugly, Toves. The weather. It didn't seem to hamper UTSA in this game, but certainly it felt like it wasn't too fun to play in because it had rained before the game or earlier in the day, and then everything was okay. And then in the second half, sometime it just started pouring. It was just an interesting, I think, environment. But Coach Pittman did say, this is one of those situations where you're going to look at going up to Philadelphia and the weather's not going to be too great. So how do we handle getting up there and playing there? I will say the bad of this game was just that early handball. I wasn't sure, and it wasn't very visible because they weren't giving too many replays. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that they even saw the handball either. So There was a review by the refs. They gave the penalty kick, and Valentina Bitterwolf, who was a player that we had highlighted, before that game, put it home against Kessler. And, look, this could have sunk the team, especially on the road. Does Temple on their senior day continue to build upon it and, really come back and upset this UTSA team, much like they upset UAB? But here we get to the good, and it's that they refocused and got the goal back just really a few minutes later. I want to say it was like 2 or 3 that they came back and they scored. So I believe it was Michelle Polo that put it in the lower left corner, got it past the goalkeeper, and then it just gave them much more confidence. And this UTSA team just looked focused. We had heard Zoe May talk to us before about the fact that after they get a goal scored on them or they score a goal, they huddle up real quick and they talk about, okay, these next 5 minutes we need. I'm sure they focused and said, all right, let's get back to our game plan and let's get to attacking these Owls. So it goes back to what the game plan was for this game, and it was once again a long ball game. This time, though, it's in the good because it worked, because those Temple defenders were not as good as UTSA's front line, and because of it, we were able to find some spots and able to get some shots off, though I would have preferred to see them kind of move it around a little bit more and have some more combinations. But we did get to see plenty of these young UTSA players out there as well. So that's also a good, Derek Pittman isn't afraid to just throw in a freshman at any point. I get it. He may not have as much to lose to say, a Jeff Traylor, in crucial situations, but you see that he's confident in his players and he'll say they can meet that moment. And I would say overall this season, there have been plenty of times where ATOs, they have met that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even though they had a big lead, you still wouldn't necessarily see other coaches sub out their goalkeeper at the end of a conference game, and for him to do that and have the confidence in his freshman goalkeeper to put her in there, certainly it was unlikely at that point that Temple was going to come back, but you never know how a freshman's going to handle that situation. So, it was great to see her get that kind of playing time and for him to have that level of confidence in her.
Well, Brian Mueller is special. That's one of the things that, Derek Pittman has done a really good job at, is he keeps finding good goalkeepers. And to me, there's not much drop off from Kessler to Mueller. And I think that's what really helps this UTSA team, because you've got goalkeepers that are just going to make the crucial stops.
Well, the team finished the regular season in 5th place at 4-3-3 in conference and 8-5-5 overall. Ava Jackson received honorable mention awards for her assist and her goal in that Temple game. And then today, the all-conference team was named, and we had several Roadrunners that were honored.
Awesome.
Defender Cam Clozo was named to the first team. Goalkeeper Jasmine Kessler was named to the second team. Midfielder Zoe May was named to the third team. And freshman forward Brooklyn Bailey was named to the all-freshman team.
All 4 had just crucial play for this UTSA team all year. I mean, they were engines in what this UTSA team did. I mean, obviously we could go on and on about Cam Cloza because she's been that veteran rock in the defense, and obviously with pair it with Jasmine Kessler, and you're pretty much in a really good spot moving forward. Zoe May, who we had on the pod, it's just been terrific as that defensive midfielder, and really adds to those first 2. And then Brooklyn Bailey, obviously we always call her, at least I always call her by her nickname BB, is exactly that. I mean, she is quick, she's strong, she's going to be, I think, a big threat for this UTSA team moving forward. Add her along with Ava Jackson, who got those honorable mention honors and who has been kind of quiet most of the season as she's come back from some major injuries. Add those 2 together, and it's a UTSA team that's going to be fun to watch in the next coming years.
Yeah, definitely. Well, next up for them is their first game of the tournament. They are the number 5 seed. They will be facing number 4 seed UAB in the first round on Monday at 4 p.m. on ESPN+.
Yeah, and look, it's not going to necessarily be right at 4 p.m. because these conference games now are going to have overtime if if they end up tied at the end of a game. So because of it, there could be a delay in the start, but around 4 o'clock is probably where you want to start looking to see when UTSA is going to be playing. Atos, I'm going to bring it in because it has to be said. But the last time UTSA played UAB in the first round of a conference tourney, they made this little run and won the CUSA tournament, and that was back in 2022. That's only 3 years ago. So I'm just saying, like, take it for what you want, but that encourages me for what this UTSA team can do. All right, well, let's preview that match against UAB. What we saw in the regular season was a physical match. There was plenty of fouls from both teams. A couple of yellow cards, I think, went to UTSA. There was one that went to UAB. So, yeah, this is just one of those situations where UAB, I think, is reeling a little bit more as they've kind of closed the season because they lost to Temple, the Temple team that we beat 3-1. It tells you just how weird, soccer can be. But just as a reminder, Izzy Lane was the one that set up the score when we tied UAB 1-1 at the end of September. She had a shot at the goalkeeper parried it away, and Ava Jackson came in crashing and scored that goal. So those two, I think, are going to be crucial, especially if we want to take on this UAB defense. To me, I think that in the midfield, Coach Pittman should start Leah Varela, Zoe May, and Emily Ekman, and put Brooklyn Bailey in the middle. I guess you could also put in Ava in the middle, but I think BB, because Leah and Emily have this connection at times with BB that's unmistakable. Like they feel so comfortable laying the ball off to each other and the way they move around each other when either one of them has the ball. I'd like to see that in a tournament game and see how they can challenge this UAB team, because I think that they're going to need to break down this UAB defense with some shorter passes in the midfield. And if we can do that and maybe mix it up with some long passes, we're going to find the goal a couple times. And I really do think that Casey Grauman, who's the player that I've brought up a few times, I just like the way she plays. I think that fits into her mold too. I think her being able to play off of Leah or Emily. Casey likes to go up and attack at times, and some of her runs going up the sidelines I think are going to be needed in this game. This is the type of thing where she can have those, really good moments. She's a tough defender, so I'm not concerned about what she's going to face defensively. But if she can add some more offensively, that's just going to be so crucial for this UTSA team. So let's get to the key players, Atovs, for UAB. Midfielder Abby Burns. I highlighted her against UTSA, and she didn't really have the best of games in that one, but she's always had this way of making her impact known against UTSA. And it was weird that last game that they were able to neutralize her, but she's got a goal and 8 assists. Forward Avery Berryman has 5 goals, 4 assists. She leads UAB with 39 shots overall. She's also a second team American Conference awardee. And then you have her fellow forward, Layla Stewart, 7 goals, 3 assists. She leads UAB with 23 shots on goal. She was a pain as well during that game back in September. She's a first team, American Conference awardee as well. So the only other player I think we need to really worry about, because they also got onto one of the all-conference teams, is defender Ava Mills. She's a very good defender, and obviously he's going to be big and slowing down this UTSA attack. So she made third team American all-conference. And then you got goalkeeper Leah Parsons, who's got a 1.22 goals against average. We scored against her, and I think we can put more past her. We just need to get some really good, solid shots. And I think if they do what I think they can do, I could see this UTSA team winning 2-1 in regulation against UAB in the first round.
Which would be great. I think we also need to all be East Carolina fans on Monday, because they are facing Memphis, and we would face the winner of that match if we do win this game against UAB. And certainly, even though we lost to both of those teams, I think we'd probably prefer to play East Carolina versus seeing Memphis again.
Yeah, and tournaments can be crazy. So let's get to it.
Before we go, let's talk about a couple of the scores in some of the other conference games this weekend. Memphis beat Rice, to no surprise, 38-14.
Yeah, it was interesting to see Memphis come back after that big win. I mean, sometimes you see teams just have a letdown, and It just goes to show you that Rice is just so far behind, the rest of the American Conference. So I don't think that they had 5 of their quarterbacks or 6 of the quarterbacks knocked out this time, which is good. But at the very least, they can, hang sometimes.
No, yeah, it looked like Chase Jenkins was back in the game.
Good to see.
Army beat Air Force with a walk-off field goal, 20-17.
That was a crazy game, Atos, because we actually got to watch that. Army, at times, looks like the immovable object they were the last few seasons. And sometimes they just look below average and can't really do pretty much nothing right, to put it pretty bluntly. But on that last drive to get that walk-off field goal, Cade Helms threw a hell of a pass downfield. It's a 42-yarder downfield and set them up really nicely.
Yeah, absolutely. North Texas knocked off Navy 31-17. So there are now no longer any undefeated conference teams.
Yeah, and I think that you could have seen a South Florida team knock off Memphis and still be undefeated at this point. You could see North Texas not losing to South Florida, right? There's a lot of situations, but I think the top of the conference is set, and they've separated themselves from the rest of the American Conference. UTSA as well has been separated from. They're much more mid American Conference level, and these top ones just know how to win on the road. So, I think that's going to be the difference, and I don't see that there's going to be many more losses by any of these top teams.
Yeah, East Carolina beat Temple 45-14, and they're kind of keeping themselves right in that hunt. They're certainly not at the top of the conference, but they're right there, kind of on the outside looking in.
They're just a dangerous team. I mean, we've seen them play last year in Greenville, and then we'll see them again in the Dome here in a couple of weeks, and it'll be interesting to see which East Carolina team shows up, because if it's the one that's pretty focused, they might be very difficult to beat in the Dome.
And moving on to UTSA basketball, men's basketball kicks off on Wednesday against College of Biblical Studies at 6 p.m. in the Convo. I've not heard of College of Biblical Studies, but I guess we'll see what they're made of when we see them on Wednesday. That game will be followed by Southern Illinois University Edwardsville SIUE on Friday at 12:30. Both of those games are on ESPN+.
Yeah, it should be fun to see this new version of the UTSA men's basketball team. We certainly have watched that scrimmage and weren't too impressed on the way they played, but I think if this team comes out and plays obviously better than what they did against UIW, then I think we'll see a team that's going to be pretty good.
And then the women's basketball team also kicks off this week, Thursday against Texas Tech at 6 p.m. And then on Saturday, they play in Houston at 7 p.m. Two tough teams to start the season, both games on the road. It's going to be a tough start for the UTSA women, and hopefully they're able to weather these two games.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I think it'll be interesting game against Texas Tech because it's going to come against Sydney Love. Remember, Sydney Love transferred from UTSA and went to Texas Tech, so just interesting to see how Sydney plays and if she gets knocked around a little bit by our UTSA players.
Very true. It's probably the first time since Coach Aston has been at UTSA since she's faced a former player. So we'll see how that whole dynamic plays out.
Yeah, I think there's been a couple of times, but they were looking at kind of minor role players. This one, Sydney Love being that starter that we had or longtime starter, it certainly makes this a little bit juicier.
Yeah, that's very true. I kind of forgotten about, some of those players, but yeah, this is the first time she'll be facing a starter that's moved on. So. Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us on the Hail Married podcast. I'm Toves.
And I'm the Toves.
We'll be back soon to recap our game against South Florida.
Birds up.